This is another video on salvation. According to Paul's letter to Titus, salvation is the combined acts of washing of regeneration and the renewing of the mind by the Holy Spirit. Washing of regeneration is another way of saying the washing of the regenerated. Like a newborn baby, a newborn spiritual baby also gets cleansed after birth. This cleansing is the deliverance of the mind from the hold of mortal thinking. This is the same message highlighted in previous videos where I discussed salvation in the Exodus of Israel, the Passover story, and in Noah's flood. The deliverance from Egyptian rule during the Exodus equates to the washing of regeneration, while receiving the law at Mount Sinai parallels renewing of the mind. Peter explains in drawing the analogy with the flood that water washing the sins away establishes the conditions for a clean conscience. With the sinfulness of the world washed off, the mind can be renewed. The concept of mind renewal is elsewhere expressed by Paul, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." Mind renewal is the replacement of our own thoughts and morals with those of Yahweh's. When someone receives spiritual ears and eyes through the second birth, he obtains the ability to understand the spiritual guidance and the application of those instructions in the physical world. Yahweh's morality replaces our own construed morality through his direct instructions into our hearts and minds. Paul not only refers to the salvation by baptism to Titus, but also in the epistles to Romans, Colossians, and Ephesians. And although he uses different words in these letters, the message is the same. For example, instead of mind renewal, he refers to quickening. Quickening is the life that flows from Yahweh's moral guidance. It articulates our spiritual body's freedom and union with Christ in heavenly places. In these epistles, he mentions either one or both aspects of salvation, namely the deliverance from our bodies of sin and the quickening together with Christ. To the Colossians and the Ephesians, he used the Greek word "sutsuarpeio" to convey the concept of quickening. To the Romans, he used the word "sutsao." In his letter to the Romans, he emphasizes that through baptism we had died with Christ, so that the body of sin could be destroyed and buried with him, and thus we are freed from sin. By death, the Messiah breaks the dominion of death over our lives. Although he doesn't mention salvation, he mentions the freedom that comes through death. It causes us to walk in the newness of spiritual life and assures us of our resurrection and living with him. To the Colossians, he remarked that our body of sin is like a letter accusing us. The letter is our flesh, telling the story of captivity by ordinances and laws. He then says the Messiah had nailed these writings, our flesh, to the cross and freed us from the accusations derived from ordinances. This broke the dominion of the law over our flesh, not because the law is broken, but because our bodies of sin has died. The law remains intact. He refers to this dying with the Christ as the circumcision of our hearts without hands. The consequence of this circumcision is a state of completeness in the Messiah. Not only that, but also through faith we had risen with the Messiah. Our spirit bodies had been quickened. We had been saved. Thus, we enter the final stage of our earthly journey after we've been fully and completely equipped for it. We have reached forgiveness of prior sins and a place where we can get forgiveness of future sins. What now remains is to, through the teaching and guidance of the Holy Spirit, abides in the Messiah. The doctrine of salvation by grace is mainly based on the letter to the Ephesians. I've seen many other scriptures used to explain this doctrine, but the Ephesians letter seems to stand alone, while the other scriptures require presumptions based on supporting Bible verses. Paul mentions both aspects of salvation by baptism in his letters to Romans and Colossians. But when addressing the issue of baptism in his letter to the Ephesians, Paul did not mention baptism as such. He only refers to the quickening of our spirits through baptism. He specifically refers to this quickening as salvation and makes sure we understand that it is by grace and not the result of our own efforts. He could just as well have added the rebirth to the list, because it's equally important to understand that neither of these is something we can achieve by our own efforts. Both are gracious gifts. In his closing remark regarding this topic, he then mentioned something that is often overlooked. He says that this gift of salvation is for the purpose of good works. We should not lose sight of the fact that this undeserved, merciful rebirth, followed by unmerited heart circumcision and resulting in quickening, is for one and one purpose only, for us to fulfill the good works that he had created for us to walk in. The Ephesians letter explains salvation by grace as a gift, but one would need the Holy Spirit to understand that Paul refers to the first salvation, not the second. Any believer who is self-righteous, as I used to be, will have difficulty in seeing this. I hope the truth comes easier for you. God bless.